like the next question about that I had about you know, in many other genres, you know, like legit, so-called legit genres or whatever, people always refer to the glass ceiling that exists for female filmmakers, you know, that it's difficult for women to be considered for work as directors or in sort of major creative roles on films and stuff like that. Whether it's them pitching their own ideas and not being taken seriously, or whether people are looking for a director and just not really considering female directors a possibility. You know, I've heard many stories, as I'm sure many people have, that there is this glass ceiling that exists in the film world. And I'm just wondering if you guys find that it's different in the horror genre at all. Like,
I think it's just, you know, it's all about finding money. It's all about getting financing. You know, I really like Antonia Bird and Mary Herron and Mary Lambert, and those ladies will tell you that it's not so much about finding the jobs, it's about getting people to give you money to make movies. Mm-hmm. So it's more about that. And that's the same for men.
Yeah.
No, I don't agree with that.
No?
No, I think there's much less funding for, women receive much less funding for, especially, not especially, but I've noticed in Canada. I don't know how I came across this survey. And I think women who have, it's a fiction feature funding attributed to women is like 15%. It's pretty shocking.
Is that because there are less women applying? Is that
I don't think
because there are
so.
less women making?
No, I don't think, because I've been on a couple of juries and there's just as many women applying. And I don't know if it's a confidence issue. I mean, I've felt it certainly on my end, that people don't think can necessarily take control. But I think it's, you know, it's going to get better. But so yeah, I think it is financing more than the glass ceiling. That's why, I mean, my first feature just by myself, and then the second one also, I'm like Izabel, I'm like, I'm not waiting another 10 years, you know, to get some bureaucrat to stamp my budget. Like, I just decided to do it on my own. I think a lot of women who make horror films sort of have that, like, fuck you attitude.
But yeah, and speaking of which, Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everybody about the crowdfunding?
I didn't want to have to wait, and you know, everybody told me, well, your idea is too ambitious. You should make a zombie movie, and I'm like, well, the world doesn't need any more fucking zombies. They need like low-budget zombie movies, really. So I wanted to make something special and something unique, and but it was very expensive, and I didn't want to wait, so I tried crowdfunding, which is like a relatively new movement for like it's an avenue available to independent filmmakers, and I really recommend it. I recommend studying it for a long time before trying it because it's not magic. But we successfully funded my film with Kickstarter. I mean, we got a grant through Bravo, but we raised $66,500 all by ourselves through Kickstarter and through this fund, you know, through Bravo Facts. So we didn't wait. And I shot my movie, and we're just in post-production now. And I think that's really great, because in the beginning people were saying, well, aren't you ashamed to use Kickstarter or to like basically ask people to contribute to your project? And doesn't that seem desperate? And I was like, well, Robert Rodriguez was selling his body to medical experiments to make his films. That's not desperate, you know. And it's really no different. You know, you're either going to some rich guy and begging him for money, or you're asking the fans to contribute. So it's a very democratic approach to making films. It's like the people are funding the projects that they want to see. So I think that the game is really changing. And you know, crowdfunding, if you can harness the power of it and understand how it works and make it work for you, then it's really going to make it so much easier for women, men, anybody to make their own independent films.
Do you want to produce my next film?
No, but I've been thinking about holding seminars on how to successfully crowdfund your film, because I studied crowdfunding for an entire year with social media marketing experts before we ever launched our campaign. Because like I said, it's not magic. You don't just start it and put a shitty video of yourself saying, you know, fund my movie and expect to make all of that money. But it does work. It does work.
Also, if I can add, like speaking of the fans and the whole overall idea of making a movie, I guess I think like, you know, out of all genres, if there's a genre that's easier, sorry, nothing's easy in terms of filmmaking, but if there's a genre that's easier, I guess it would have, I believe it's horror because as Jovanka said, it's whether the film is good or bad, like, you know, but the horror fans are going to be willing to take risk more than I think in any other genres to watch movies made by someone who's unknown just because they've heard it's good. So I think the horror industry is great in terms of that, in terms of their fans and their willingness to take risk and to want to discover something new. Because I think, I don't know what it is about the genre, but there seems to be that whole open-mindedness about it.
But I think also, and I mean, I'm not just saying this because I work for Fantasia, but basically the festival circuit, I think, is a huge part of that because, you know, the amount of horror films that come out theatrically, it's like 5% of the ones that get made. And, you know, so it's like the festivals is where a lot of these films get seen and where an audience is nurtured that's kind of like, I don't want to say taught to be open-minded, but they kind of like learn by taking risks on all these kinds of films to not just expect some pigeonholed idea of what horror is and to like have like, you know, because you look at the programming at a festival like this or Fantastic Fest or Sitges or whatever, and I mean, these aren't just like horror in a box kind of festivals, you know, like, I mean, like people, there's so much exchange going on between different genres and stuff, and I think that the fans, like that horror has created, you know, it's created this giant, really supportive, really knowledgeable fan base of horror fans so that, you know, when you go to get a film funded, you know, with Kickstarter, not only are they often aware of who you are, even though you sometimes might not even think they are, but they know everything. And, you know, and they're really a really notoriously supportive group of people. You know, like everybody always says horror fans are like your family for life. You know, if you make a horror film once, they'll love you forever, you know.
Je voudrais juste ajouter quelque chose sur ce que Maude elle disait. Ce que je trouve dommage, moi, c'est que c'est vrai que le public en général de films de genre, c'est un public qui est très enthousiastes, très assoiffés. C'est des gens en général très ouverts qui sont prêts à voir vraiment toutes sortes de choses. Mais ce que je trouve dommage, c'est que justement, il y a comme une espèce d'overload de films très médiocres qui sortent. Et ça donne une image au final un peu bâclée du cinéma d'horreur, ce qui fait que c'est un genre qui est encore beaucoup snobé parce qu'on associe ça à de la production cheap, des trucs un peu n'importe comment, alors que le film d'horreur peut être vraiment un film avec une recherche d'esthétisme, avec un discours, avec une portée. Et puis, moi, c'est ce que je trouve dommage, c'est que tout le monde veut faire des films d'horreur à peu près, en tout cas. Moi, quand j'ai commencé, c'était vraiment marginal. On dirait que là, c'est la grosse mode. Tout le monde va en faire. Il y a tellement de crap qui sortent. Il y en a vraiment tellement que les gens qui trippent sur le cinéma vont dire « Ah, le cinéma d'horreur, c'est de la merde. » Et c'est ce que je trouve dommage. Mais je suis d'accord avec ce que tu dis, mais c'était juste pour apporter ce petit bémol.
Yeah, well, because in the mainstream they like to celebrate mediocrity, right? And that's one of the things I love about like the Fantasia Festival and films like, I don't know if anybody saw Theatre Bazaar last night, it's a great example of what you can do. You have like these 7 short films and they're all wildly different. And you know, and for Doug Buck's segment, it wouldn't normally be described as a horror film, but those are my favorite kinds of films, the kind that challenge the conventions of the genre, and those are the kind of films that I like to make too. Yeah. It's interesting, being a woman, people kind of expect you to make females-oriented films, you know? I don't know if any of you have had that experience, but they almost expect to
What does female-oriented mean?
I don't know, I guess like, movies made from the female vantage point, and you know, instead of the male gaze, the female gaze, and I just don't think it's like that. I mean, Doris Wishman was making exploitation films before Herschel Gordon Lewis ever even picked up a camera, and they're just as raunchy and just as sleazy. And Humanoids from the Deep was directed by a woman, and you know, so, and those are totally male gaze movies, right? So I think. I guess my original point was, you know, like, it's breaking free from mediocrity and being allowed to have freedom to make whatever we want.
So you don't feel that, or do you feel at all that your gender has any relevance to like the type of films that you make? Is there any kind of sensibility filtering in there, issues, conflicts that you deal with that are specifically you think because you're a woman?
I have, like, I guess my only, contribution to this is that I've done 2 shorts now that deal with like self-mutilation, basically, and that being the basis of like the body horror. And I found that a lot of the times when I would talk about my films to people tend to ask me if I'm a cutter. They ask me if I like an eating disorder in the past, if I like a self-mutilator myself, because I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, but they kind of expect because I tackled that theme, because I really wanted to make a film about this, that automatically it means that it's something that is personal to me, which is not at all the case. So I know personally, for me, my reaction is that yes, I guess because I'm a woman, people tend to think that what I'm doing is very personal, or like is a bit more, yeah, there's a reason why. And I just think that, I guess in terms of my own experience, that's my input. And I think, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman, but I think it is.
Well, I mean, I think it's all, everyone who makes films, there's some part of them in there, whether it's obvious or not. Like, I made a zombie movie about a nurse who's bit by a zombie and becomes a sex kitten. And it's like it sounds very silly in a movie, but it's about a woman's awakening to her sexuality, and whether it's how that can feel monstrous at times. Oh, maybe I'm really fucked up. But you know, the whole debate of like, if you're the monster who goes to get the guy, or the guy comes to you, like if you're too aggressive or whatnot. So that was maybe something I was wrestling with in my 20s. So it is about me, and now I'm writing one about a woman who's pregnant, who finds out her husband's a vampire. And so the whole idea of how she ended up with this man who could lie to her, how she's lied to herself, and she's living in the suburbs, and let's just say that it doesn't end really well. But it is about myself, about my struggle as a woman, whether I want to have a normal life in the suburbs with a man, and how really I find that horrific, that idea. And so that's, I think every artist, whether they're a man or a woman, brings part of themselves into their films. Sometimes people think it's going to be super obvious, but that's sort of uninteresting.
Yes.
Well, I think of course, obviously we all have a part of ourselves in what we do, but I think what I find is a bit disappointing is the fact that I'm guessing certain of these films, I think if a man would have made them, maybe he would not have had the same questions. It seems like it's a bit more understandable that certain themes could be tackled, but from a very neutral point of view, as opposed to, I guess, like that's it. I can totally agree with what you said about putting a bit of ourselves in our work, but I think that it's a bit like, you know, disorienting that like people automatically assume that because you're a woman, you're going to do something that is automatically something very personal, when like it's kind of like, no, I just want to make a movie. I want to make a movie that I'd like to see, like, you know. So
Me, it's amazing all the questions I have with fantasy, because it's about medical fetishism and whatever. I did another comedy about scatophilia. You have no idea how many comments and questions I had in the past, like, who are you? And can't wait to see for the next time. I think it's a sadomasochist movie, so whatever. You know, just obviously, when you're a woman, you need a reason to make those atrocities, to make those. Well, this is something I hate personally. I think I don't have a reason to do that. I just want to do it, and that's all, you know. And I think with men, it's very different. You do that, you're a man, you're cool. You're a woman, well, probably you're in your periods. Probably you don't have enough sex. Probably you're a lesbian and you don't know it yet. Whatever.
But there must, I mean, I don't know, I guess maybe there's always, to me, a reason why, an underlying reason why you do things, whether it's a man or a woman. So not to say that you like scatophilia, but you know, maybe you're interested by like someone who's on the margins. So you know what I mean?
But I think it is true often that if a man makes a movie about a certain topic that's maybe some kind of headier, touchy, emotional subject or whatever, they're like, oh, they made this interesting movie about this interesting subject. But if a woman makes a movie about that subject, they assume that she's had some kind of personal experience with that subject or some kind of trauma that's being worked out in that movie.
Yeah.
But why don't we look at
And in
some?
some cases, actually, it is true. In some cases, it's true. Marina Devan's film, In My Skin, is only, that story could only have been told by a woman. It's coming from a very deep, deep-seated place. So that's not to say, this discussion is, not to say that women can't make stories that come from deep personal trauma. In fact, sometimes those are the best stories, right? But that being said, I've also seen men make stories about body horror, about motherhood, about abortion, about stillbirth, The Brood and Grace, and these films, are female stories, but they're made by men and they're handled no less deftly. So.